Hey folks, it is me again, and I am here today to talk to you about the Lab Synopsis learning targets. And you may be thinking to yourself, Mr. Lang, why are you talking to me about Lab Synopsis learning targets when we haven't done a lab yet? Well, I'll tell you right now, kids, that the reason why I'm going to talk to you about Lab Synopsis learning targets before we've done a lab is that we're a little tiny bit behind. Not really, but a little bit maybe. And it is absolutely possible for you to start writing a lab synopsis before you've even done the lab. In fact, it's probably a good idea for you to do that because if you write about something, that means that you're thinking about something. And if you think about a lab synopsis before you do the lab, guess what? You'll understand the lab. How many times in other classes have you done a lab not really understanding why you were doing it until you were done, or maybe even never? So I want you to take some time to think about photosynthesis and the photosynthesis lab that you hopefully have made a draft procedure for. You have a null hypothesis, an alternative hypothesis, um, and I want you to focus on a couple of areas because for this lab synopsis, it's going to be a little bit different than I have it laid out in the lab synopsis targets, and I'll explain the differences. So, first of all, the summary of the lab synopsis, you can write almost the entire summary before you have even approached the lab. So you'll get 2 grades when I grade you on your lab synopsis summary. You have lab synopsis 1 and lab summary 1 and lab summary 2. So the first grade comes from your ability to concisely communicate the overall gist of the lab activity in a dinner table, not procedural way. That means you don't say, the first thing we did was we took out the biochamber 2000, and then we got an oxygen sensor, and then we took some radish plants from Mr. Lang's light bank, and then we put the radish plants into the biochamber 2000, and then we took them out in the sun, and then we collected data, and then we put it in the shade, and then we collected data. Your job here is to talk about photosynthesis in a general way. Talk about the ins and outs. This is where you show me that you understand photosynthesis, and you can go into a little bit of detail about the things that we were doing, but you want to be doing this. Imagine that like Uncle Louie came over for dinner and he said, "Hey, what are you doing in AP biology?" This is what you're going to tell him. It's a generalized conversation that's going to explain to me that you understand the overall gist of the lab without being procedural. So that's summary 1. And it's challenging to write those at first, but you're going to be real good at it by the end of the year. Summary 2. I can explain how the measurement technique is connected to the biological processes being measured in the experiment. This one's easier. If you understand photosynthesis, you understand what we're measuring. I'm not going to go into detail here. You understand what we're measuring and why, and that's all you have to talk about for summary 2. It can be a couple of sentences, and that's enough. For summary 1, we're looking at more of a paragraph. And by the way, you can put summary 1 and 2 into the same paragraph, and that's 100% okay. For this lab, I'm going to move on to hypothesis now. For this lab, we are going to focus on having a null and an alternative hypothesis. I don't care what form you put them in. So the if-then piece and the cause and effect predictions are not as important for this lab. What I want you to do is I want you to state your null hypothesis, and I want you to state an alternative hypothesis, and why scientifically you assume that that alternative hypothesis is valid. So you can actually write the summary, the more challenging part, and the hypothesis before we even get together to do the lab. Can you do the graphs? No. Can you do the results? Absolutely not. Can you do the explanation? You actually could probably start drafting the explanation because the explanation is going to be sort of a continuation of your summary, but I would say that you're probably going to be better off leaving those sections for after we do the lab. So your work today focuses around figuring out how to concisely communicate the overall gist of a lab activity without being, for lack of a better term, in an AP Bio class, too sciencey. You just want to lay out the general ideas, talk about the ins and outs of photosynthesis, why photosynthesis is important overall, and really generally what you're doing in this experiment. And then move on to measurement techniques, that's summary 2, and then make your null an alternative hypothesis with some sort of valid scientific reasoning. Hope this helps, and I will see you later when we hopefully get to do a lab, because it'll be sunny outside. Have a wonderful remote day.